You're no stranger to controversy. So through the years, you have taken very public stands against error. And presently, you find yourself in another controversy related to this whole pandemic, the COVID-19 controversy. And you have been applauded by many. You've been critiqued by others with your willingness and your choice to continue to meet as a church on the Lord's Day. So you've chosen to defy the mandates. So why did you make that choice?
Yeah, well, I like to remind people I'm not doing anything different now than I've done for 50 years. I show up in church and I preach and we sing and we worship the Lord and everybody comes. Look, there are only two things to think about. If you go back in church history, every place you find a preacher who stood against the authorities, you make a hero out of him, right? I mean, that's church history. If you study church history, the heroes are all those guys who took issue with the powers that be, whether you're talking about Luther or Calvin or John Knox or the Puritans and when in the expulsion, they were all thrown out of their churches. And so it's been the reality through the history of the church that faithfulness to the divine mandate and to the Word of God has resulted in conflict with earthly authorities. And as we go back in church history and find those locations, we have always made heroes out of those men who stood against the government intruding on the church. Now, that's just what's happening today. The government says, shut your church down. And my initial response is, well, wait a minute. We would never do that. We wouldn't think of doing that unless there was some compelling reason. So we were told at the beginning that millions were going to die, right? Millions of people are going to die from COVID. And just simply stated, we don't want to kill millions of people. So I said, fine, let's just do live stream. And I preached to an empty auditorium for 3-4 weeks, and then all of a sudden people started coming. We didn't say anything, we didn't announce anything, we didn't do anything, and they started to come because it was becoming crystal clear that the narrative was not true. It was not true. Every single week that has become more clear and more clear and more clear. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't know the reality, so I've tried to help people with that. Now we have 7,000-8,000 people there on a Sunday. They fill up the worship center. They fill up the family center. They fill up a tent. They fill up other rooms in the classroom building. They're all over the place. And there are no social distancing, no masks, and nobody that we know is sick. We had one couple in March that got that COVID, and then we knew of one other guy in our church and maybe another person who was tested positive, but we haven't had any outbreak of anything. And it's not that the church is the proof of that. It's the church is the reflection of the fact that it's being proven all through society. People aren't sick. Our people are not sick. So they just keep coming to church and coming to church. And it's been an incredible joy. So the only thing that I said at the beginning was the church needs to be the church unless there is some kind of deadly thing loose. If we determine that that's not true, then we need to be the church. In California, you have 1/100th of 1% chance of getting COVID. If you get COVID, this is in the court. This was presented to the court that we were in a week ago. In California, if you live in California, you have one chance in 19.1 million that you're going to die from COVID. If you're over 50, if you're under 50, you have no chance. So what in the world is going on? Once we realize, and we got to be truthful with people. And that means, that's part of preaching in the season. We as a pastor, I've got to teach my people the Word of God, but I need to be navigating the world around them to protect them if they need protection, but to tell them the truth if they're being lied to. And our people know that they have been lied to over and over and over and over. And the masks is so foolish. Most doctors would tell you it's not going to help you to wear a bacterial zoo in front of your face. That makes no sense. So once our people realized that there was no real danger here, and even the local people in the health department, we've heard amazing testimonies that even I heard from one of the employees, 90% of the health department is disgusted the way they're handling Grace Church. Yeah. So they know things that, the public doesn't know. It's unfortunate. So, but the fallout of that has been that people whose churches closed down are pouring into our church, and we're just being overwhelmed with people, and it's wonderful. And all of a sudden, just having a church service, singing hymns, hearing the Word of God, fellowshipping, has taken on a completely new meaning. And I think because there's a sense that something is happening in our country that's not going to get fixed. And it's one thing when there's a trend and it goes away, or even 9/11 was there and it was done and life got back to normal. For a lot of people, this feels like the end of things as they've always known them. And so there's a kind of eschatological kind of angst about this. There's a fear that it's never going to be right again, that the forces are just too massive, too overwhelming. If you can lock down an entire nation and destroy people, destroy them, and then lock down the world and destroy people all over the world, and even with multiple millions of people negatively affected and even dying because of the lockdown, they still don't lift the lockdown. People know that there are forces in control of their world and their lives that are frightening to them, more frightening than anything they've ever known, and anything in my life. And so there's a sense that they want to hear from God. They want to go to a place that's safe, that's trustworthy, that explains reality to them and helps them navigate this. So it's been an explosive time for our church. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have children for weeks and weeks. The Sunday we opened up the children's ministry, there were 1,000 children that showed up. We had balloons all over campus, and there were 100, I think they counted over 100 children signed in who had never been to our church. So that reflects the fact that families are concerned about their kids and their grandkids. So, we are at a point now where there are doctors and epidemiologists contacting us all the time saying, we would like to testify on your behalf in court. I got a letter from one a couple of days ago saying there are many who believe that the testing is 90% unreliable. So what is that going to do? That a vaccine is not going to do anything. We've never had a vaccine that got guaranteed effects to more than 30% of the population. So all this is floating around. We don't major on that, but because our people have been meeting long enough now and nothing has happened, that they're not worried about it. But at first, I tried to help them understand some of those things.
Yeah, really good.